Always live lovely.
So welcome back, lovely people. I know it's been a minute. I know I told y'all season 2 was coming and I started and I stopped, but it's okay because we're going to roll out these next couple of episodes, honestly, over the course of this next month and a half so that we can finish up this season 2. Very short, very sweet, like I said, and like I promised. And there'll be a little surprise at the end of the season of why this season is very short and very sweet. Excuse me. So today we are going to be having episode 11 of Breaking Barriers, a mental health discussion podcast. And we have an amazing, beautiful person who is here to just really shed some light on some important topics. I'm super excited. Y'all don't know, but we really been trying to plan and do the Zoom and do the recording and do the conversation. And we've been struggling. But we're here because we want to get this information out to you. So today we are going to be talking about an undocumented lens, which I think is just that's a savvy title. I'm not going to take the credit for that. This is all this phenomenal guest's idea.
Always living lovely. Just don't let the times go by. Do something. You don't gotta go outside yourself to prove nothing. You can lean on me if you need a hand. You can lean on me if you need a friend. You know that I got you. You know that we got you. Yeah.
And so the person that I will be talking to today when it comes to an undocumented lens is Amrit Kaur. And I'm going to allow Amrit to introduce herself, but definitely just so that you know a little bit about who she is. She is a storyteller, and I really love being able to just identify when people identify themselves as a storyteller because she's into the arts and really making an impact with the work that she does. And I'm all about arts because y'all know I have a background with singing and dance. And so anytime that I get somebody that's artistic, I'm through the roof about it. And them just taking their passions and things that are very social justice driven, things that are very important in life, and just being able to do it all encompassing, it's beautiful. So she's a storyteller. And she's also the community organizer who co-founded the Brown Girl Joy production. So she's going to tell you a little bit more about herself in the beginning, and towards the end, she's going to tell you even more of what you can expect from her, different projects she has coming out. But for now, Amrit, please introduce yourself to the lovely people.
Yay, thank you so much, Chetina. I really appreciate being on here, and shout out to you for, helping organize this. I know we've been trying to do this for over 2 months, actually, since the beginning of February. So we're finally here, and I'm really appreciative. I'm really glad. I'm really present with you right now. So yeah, hi everyone. My name is Amrit Kaur. My pronouns are she, her, they, them. I'm a queer and documented filmmaker and storyteller from Los Angeles, California. I immigrated to the US with my family from India in October 2000, and I've been here for a little bit over 2 decades now. The work that I do is creative work that really, really challenges white supremacy and just traditional narratives. API folks, BIPOC individuals, LGBTQ plus individuals are in the US, while also exploring what does community healing look like, what does individual mental health look like, and what does joy look like for folks like us, right? And so with that being said, I co-founded my production company with my younger siblings, Jazz and Namani Kaur. It's called Brown Girl Joy Productions. And that's kind of the work that we're doing right now, exploring all these different avenues and intersectional topics and identities through our filmmaking work, as well as our consultant work and other media making work. So yeah, that's what I'm here for. And thank you again, Chetina, for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. And I want to take a moment to just acknowledge the family business aspect of things. The fact that you created this with your sisters is so phenomenal to me.
Yeah, we're trying to make a legacy.
Exemplifies. Yes.
Yeah. It's important, we came to this country with nothing in hand, and here I am as the eldest of 4 younger siblings, trying to make a name for us here, and my parents did so much to be here. So it's I gotta make it, I gotta do all this extra stuff. So I appreciate you saying that too. It's really affirming. And also on that topic, I just wanted to say, you said you did singing. Oh my God, I would love to ask you to sing for us later. Oh my gosh. That'd be so funny. We have like a little Beyonce moment. Yeah.
Right.
Get the karaoke mic.
Then you have to razzle and dazzle that in there
Mhm.
somewhere. Yes, absolutely. Definitely arts is in my background. And it'll be cool to like even just for us to collaborate on something one
Yeah,
day.
yeah.
Like
What other
that would
artwork do you do though? Like, what do you do?
usually like my background because I went to an art school, arts high school. So my emphasis there was vocal music, and then during that time I also
Ooh.
danced. And then of course, like when you go to college and when you go to like grad school, then that becomes a very primary focus.
Oh, for
So
sure.
like mental health and getting my master's, getting licensed took a lot of energy. But I'm definitely trying to find a way because I just have a vision for Always Live Lovely to not only just offer the therapy aspects or the consultation aspects and just putting educational information out, but I've always had a dream of being able to kind of integrate the arts side of me, like whether it's through some type of visual, because sometimes I can be pretty visually creative, whether it's through dance, most definitely through music and healing, because there's like an avenue now to where people do the
Yeah.
kind of music style that I always dreamed of when I was little, which is like motivational mental health messages type of music, whether it's affirmations or it's just kind of like having a storyline that's like a mental health storyline to uplift people. I'm really into that. So I'm hoping to expand it in that way throughout
That's
throughout
so
this year and the
dope.
coming years.
That's so dope, dude. And congrats. Like you're doing
Thank
such
you.
amazing work too. And even like real quick before we dive into my thing, I would love if you would just share like what inspired the name, like Always Live Lovely. It already
Yeah.
like just hearing you say that name made me already want to like live a better life and like just feel good about myself. So I would love for you to share with us and your audience like what
Yeah.
inspired the name.
Nobody actually has ever asked me that. The interesting thing about it is I started Always Live Lovely as a blog in 2013. So it's just a blog.
Wow.
And then so when I had the blog, then in the bio, I would kind of give like this is where I got the name from, and this is what it means to me. And then of course over time it's morphed into like a business and it's become more of a thing. But I always mention like this is something I've been doing since 2013, and this is where it started, and this is where I'm trying to go. But it's actually based off of my grandfather on my mother's side, because every time it was like a phrase he would say every single time, no matter what was going on in life, literally no matter what was going on in the life, if you asked him how he was doing, he would say, I'm doing lovely, lovely, lovely. Like that's what he always said. I never heard him say anything different,
Oh,
no matter
yeah.
what life threw at him. And then so it was kind of a way of probably like my way of honoring, because I love honoring my ancestors, because he's now passed away for some time
Oh,
now. So
snap,
it's a
snap.
way of like being able to honor him. And it was just like, that's really beautiful to have that perspective that no matter what triumphs you need to overcome in life, whether you're at the top of the top or the lowest of the low, he always just stayed consistent with seeing the brighter side of things. And lovely is just like, it's a beautiful word. Like, it's mentioned in the
Yeah.
Bible, meditating on things that are lovely. When you think of what's lovely, it just makes you feel good. It's just so warm. And that's why I have the rose in there, because it's just so warm and encompassing of just like something that's just so beautiful. So I was like, you know what? Always live lovely. I really want to help people figure out what that means for them, what that looks like for them, mental health wise, to literally always live lovely. So that's pretty much where the name came from.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
sharing that. And as soon as you mentioned honoring your ancestors and your grandfather always saying, I'm lovely, I just I resonated with that hard because a lot of the like my current project for Bronco Joy Productions, which
Mhm.
I'll get into later on, it was also inspired by my grandmother on my mom's side.
Okay.
And so like there's a whole thing there too. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Oh, I would love to. That's so ironic. That's so
yeah.
ironic. I would definitely love for you to share more about that, because I think like that's important. And one thing that you mentioned is like when it comes to your family story and like coming here and coming to America, wanting to have a legacy, I feel like the road that we all travel is like an additional length to that road that the people before us have traveled. So we're just like
Oh, definitely.
passing that torch on and like just
Mhm.
keeping and hoping to like elevate it rather than kind of bring it down to shambles, but elevate it. And then so the fact that like, you're mentioning like, okay, this is a way of something that was inspired from people before you too, that's a really amazing thing. And it's going to help just continue to build this legacy that it is that you mentioned that, your sisters are trying to do, because it's going to be amazing. People are going to know about it. it's going to become this
Yeah,
very big thing, bigger than probably what you ever even imagined. So it's just a simple fact
yeah,
that's like, wow, like this can go back and honor someone else who put in hard work, and really tried to
yeah,
help your
yeah.
family make a way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the way I think of it too is like, is similar to what you said of like you're building on things. I think of it as like we're like for my family and I right now, we're at a point where we're standing on a mountain, right? That was built
Mhm.
very slowly by different people. And like what our job right now is to, of course, like, look back and like assure that all the people who, sacrificed and like who brought us up to that point are honored in great ways, right? As we're standing on the mountain. But like now our job is to not just be on that mountain and like be overlooking things. It's to build it even higher for that, like, for
Right.
the next people who come in our family, like our kids, our future generations to also have the opportunity to not just stand on that mountain, but also to like have that moment to stand even higher and to look back and be like, wow, this is how far we've come. This is so much of like what our life, like our life legacies were, and like
Hmm.
what we need to keep carrying. And so I think like even for us, like all the things that we do in our company are very encompassing of like these definite like themes of honoring family, honoring ancestors, also honoring like our matriarchs. Like my mom
Right.
basically was the one who she actually helped us escape India because my dad's family was trying to kill us because she had two
Uh-huh.
daughters. So like the whole immigration
Oh,
story is kind of
wow.
wild.
Okay.
It's really wild. Yeah, like I was 3 and my younger sister was like she had just turned 1. And so we had to basically leave India like in a rush because my dad's family did not like us because we are daughters. And in the 90s, when you're born as a daughter, like you're not honored and you're not like
Hmm.
liked as much and you're not given the respect that you need. And so like oftentimes what would happen in Punjab is when the wife would have a daughter, like she would either be kicked out or like the husband would be allowed to like, get married again. And this was not like legal or anything. It was just like the family would just do it.
Right.
And
Hmm.
that's also just to clarify, like, I'm not speaking for all of India. I'm
Hmm.
speaking of just like my village and like
Right.
where I come from in the state of Punjab. And like that's kind of like what was really, really normal in the 90s. And it's still really it's messed up, but it's still happening in a lot of different little villages in that state. But yeah, so we ended up having to come here because my mom was the one who like told my dad, like she gave him an ultimatum. She was a badass, and she was like, "Look, I'm either gonna
Period.
take your daughters and I'm gonna run away, or you
Uh-huh.
need to figure something out with your family." And my dad's way of figuring it out was like just like like connecting with so many different people to like end up going to like a couple different countries before we ended up in Los Angeles. And so like it was kind of like we went to Dubai to see if we could settle there. And then we went to like I think England, we had some relatives
Hmm.
there. And then finally we landed here in the US. And this is kind of where we ended up staying because like the education system here was the best. Like it's free public
Okay.
education, and he had a couple of different like I think no, we didn't have relatives here in LA, but we had different friends of his that like he knew back from like back home in his village. And so like we ended up coming here, but the whole idea of it was like now for a 25-year-old femme identifying queer person, now I'm like thinking about these ideas that like my mom
Yeah.
was basically the person who made this happen, not even my dad, and like
Hmm.
as someone who never had a lot of power in her life, for me now it's like important to honor her as like
Absolutely.
the matriarch, and that's kind of like where I think that mountain building comes up is like it is all about legacy building and like
Hmm.
also of course like breaking, like traumatic, I guess, traditions while doing it. Because my parents and I
Hmm.
do have a lot of pushback on what I'm doing and like how I'm trying to do it. But like it's we're both or I guess like sorry, my parents, myself, we're all trying to go to the same place, the same goal, just in different ways. Like their understanding of like what a great daughter is or like what a great family member is so different than what mine is. Like mine is all about like, I make sure everyone's mental health is great. Like I make sure
Uh-huh.
that people are good and that, like, people are doing things that make them happy in their life. Whereas for my parents, they didn't have that privilege, right? Like they had to just
Right.
work 7 days a week. They had to like work whatever job they could, like just suck up, and like just shut up and not like think about their own pride. Whereas for us, like now we have the privilege of
Right.
thinking about things like mental health and
Opportunity.
stepping
Hmm.
up. And yeah, exactly. Stepping up and thinking about opportunities that they've basically created for us. And so like, so that's also part of the legacy building for me is like
Yeah.
thinking about these things, right? Like of like, how do we make it better for people who come after us? And not just in the way of like opportunities, like money, or like resources, but like just even like our mental health and like our relationships, on one-on-one level. Like, so yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, that really adds even more just to the underlying story of brown girl joy. Like that says a
Mm,
lot. And just the fact that you're naming something and kind of pushing something in that way in the story that you just shared with us is like you can see where the barriers are being broken and how your mom was kind of like, this ain't it. Like, this is not the way we about to do this. And she kind of like sparked that. And then you guys are just basically carrying it to like the next level and making it a thing for it to be okay for the women to be honored. Like, I feel like that is like extremely dope with the way that you just said, like, you know, in where you're from, like the girls, like, they're not respected, they're not honored, but it's the whole idea of being able to be proud of who you are, being proud of what you represent, being proud of, you know, where you've been and where you're trying to go. And I heard you say that mental health wise, you know, it sounds like you're very passionate about that, and trying to bring like a shining light to that as well, because I can only imagine like mentally what that felt like for your mom, mentally what that even felt like for your dad, you know, y'all being little and having to see some of those things and kind of like going through the transition, and the experiences of trying to get here, plant yourself and create something anew, something healthy, something better. So I'm curious just about like, you know, if you want to share a little bit more even about like that mental health aspect of things, and even what's kind of like helped you or like your mom, even more particularly like your mom, like just get to a space of being okay.
Yeah, honestly, transparently, like no one in my family is okay mentally because my parents don't they don't have, like, we live in California, so like, you know, California has covered California healthcare, but
Mm-hmm.
my parents don't qualify for it. So they don't have full scope like Medi-Cal to be able to like get a therapist or even go to a
Right.
simple doctor's checkup. And so like for us, the biggest thing has been having to like take care of one another in
Mm-hmm.
ways that's just not been super healthy for all of us. Like we've had to do, you know, the idea of like trauma bonding, things like that. Like we've kind of had to do all that for the last 2 decades. And like even you saying like yeah, like my youngest sibling and I when we first came here. So it was just two of us in the beginning, and then our three youngest siblings were born here. So we're a mixed status family.
Okay.
Like some of us are undocumented and some of us are not.
Mm-hmm.
And so in our mixed status family, me being the eldest, like I kind of always had to you know, like be that person that everybody would come to when there was different issues. Like, you know, my parents too, like they don't speak the best English. Like my mom doesn't know English at all. And my dad speaks it a little bit and he's pretty fluent now. But back in that day, like, you know, 15, 20 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
he also wasn't the best. And so like I would be the person that everybody came to like, you know, make doctor's appointments, make appointments at school. Like I would be the one that my siblings took to parent teacher conferences. Because
Right.
like it was like there was no other
To
person who could
translate.
understand these
Mm-hmm.
things. And I would be like, I'd only be like 9 or 10 myself, trying to be the
Right. You're
like,
like,
you know, like translator. I'm like, oh, you know, whatever. Like, and like anytime we had official documents come in the mail, you know, I was the one who had to read words and I'd be like, I don't know what litigation means.
right.
Like, and my parents would be like, what do you go to school for? Are you stupid? Like, you know, so
Mm-hmm.
there's always these like immigrant parent moments and like an immigrant child like moments for me growing up that kind of led to us all not having great mental health. And like, I never even heard the terms mental health until like, I think I was like 19 or 20. And like, I think around that time, it was like 2014 to 15-ish when like, even like the mental health movement was becoming a lot bigger right after like social media became a big thing and like,
Right.
you know, in the 2010s. And so like, with all that being said, we from that time to now, like fast forward like 10 years, we don't all have great mental health. Like my mom is still suffering a lot. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's her story to tell, so I won't say too much on it. But like she's suffering greatly because like our grandmother, you know, her mom passed away in 2018 from ovarian cancer.
Uh-huh.
And again, more on that later when I talk about my film stuff, because it's all inspired by all that and that heartbreaking moment. But my mom was never able to like go see in India. And like she had never seen her mom for like over 22 years
Yeah.
and she passed. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was a very hard time for her. And some of my other relatives in India who were really close to her passed as well. And you know, in the last 20 years, like she's gotten more and more heartbreak, you know, because she's with every person that passes, like the reality of her never maybe being able to go back to India sets in for her
Uh-huh.
even
Uh-huh.
harder, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so like for her, it's just a really, really honestly, like, excuse my language, but like shitty thing. And there's no way I think that like we can even help her right now because it's like all stuff that she's had to internalize and she was forced to like basically keep it like, you know, compartmentalized for a long time while she was raising all five of us. And now that
Right.
she's older, she's now starting to like kind of open all these boxes up in her head and she's now starting to like look at her trauma in a different way, but it's not like I don't think she'll ever have a moment in her life where she'll be okay mentally now, because it's like there's just too much that has happened. And
Yeah.
so my mom's like that, and my dad also, he's the very like typical, like man of the house, like patriarch who like keeps things to himself. Like he feels like he's burdened with everyone's dependency on him. So like he works like 6 to 7 days a week. He does manual labor, like a construction work, sorry. And for him, it's like always been about making sure everyone else in the family is good, and not mentally, but like just that the bills are paid,
Right.
there's a roof over our head,
The
the
basic
basic necessities.
necessities.
And even growing up, I had that moment where I don't know if you've watched Fences or read it, like, Denzel Washington, where
Hmm.
he's like, he's telling his son, like, you think I don't love you? Like, of course I love you. Like, what do you think me paying your bills is? What do you think me
Exactly.
keeping a roof over your head is, right? And like, and that's kind of like what my dad was growing up. Like we'd be like, you don't love us. And like, my sister and I would always just have arguments with him, and he'd be like, of course I do. Like, look at what I'm doing. Like, I'm
Hmm.
here doing all this extra stuff. And so like mental health in my family is still gonna be a huge journey, because there's seven of us, right? Like my parents and five siblings, like
Right.
we're all at different places in our lives. Like I'm 25 now, like I mentioned, and I'm barely starting to like assess the fact that I do need to go to therapy. I've never
Hmm.
had a therapist before, because I also never had like full scope medical, but I'm
Right.
in grad school now, and we do have like, healthcare from the UC system. And so like
Hmm.
I'm now at a point where I'm like, oh, I can get it like for at least another year while I'm in school, and just hope that that helps. But everyone else in my family is again at different places, and like, it's going to be a journey for all of us, and it's a different journey.
Right.
I can just hope that like in the future we'll all be okay, and be able to like talk to one another about different difficulties that we faced. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I absolutely hear just that whole story of like what a lot of different people tend to have to do is just kind of like survival, doing what you have to do to survive. And life is throwing some really crappy things at you, and you don't really have the time to process or fall apart or cry or do that, because you got to make sure you're taken care of, your family is taken care of. And then so it like gets pushed to the back burner, or you don't really have the time to invest in it, or it's so stigmatized that it's like, that's just not what you do. And then so the fact that like, even though you all are at different paces, it sounds like everyone's kind of, having a little bit of understanding in little ways along the way, because it's never too late. Like mental health, we have a brain. So we're gonna have like a form of mental
Yeah.
health until the day that we're not here anymore. And then so it's never too late for people to come around and just seek better and seek understanding. And
Mm.
I hear you with really just wanting that for the different members of your family, because you all have a variety in ages, a variety in generations, and it's that whole idea of not giving up, or at least within the family unit, finding healthier and better ways to support each other. Because even if that's what it has to be, that you all lean on each other, like like you said, trauma bonding can happen like very quickly and very easily. But the moment that people become aware and have more knowledge about something, little shifts can happen to where it doesn't have to be like, okay, well, we're connected purely through trauma and then we trigger each other, and then it just causes this whole ripple effect. Like you're able to be like, okay, well, what are better ways that we can communicate? Or when we're spending time together, what are things we can do to bring joy and facilitate joy? Or how can y'all just recreate the narrative in a way for yourself to where it doesn't always have to bring so much heartbreak, but that it can also be honorable, and that it also can bring like, okay, love and strength, and like reflect on like those very deeply rooted themes that are within there too. And y'all definitely have the power to be able to do that within your own unit. And just like I hear that struggle too of like the access to be able to
Yeah,
even
there's no access.
care
Yeah.
for yourselves. It's not, and that's a very impacting thing. And I can imagine that, on top of like your mom worried about like, okay, I can't even go back to see people, and people die and things happen, and not being able
Yeah.
to just be there for them. And even things that you probably experience and have for yourself, do you feel like there's particular fears that have been like more prominent just in like, for you in your life story, whether it's mental health related or not, as well as just the continued impact that you have seen, whether it's in your family or people that maybe you've met within your community while being here in America that are experiencing the same things?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's a topic I could go on about day by day. Like it's so just so extensive. Some of the things that just come to mind real quick, are like for sure, yeah, like there's the experiences that my family have with like lack of access to even just a simple like therapy intake rate is huge in our community. So just to give you a quick breakdown, in California alone, in the last like few years, there was a survey done. I forgot like the website, so I'm not gonna say the name because I completely forget, but
Mm-hmm.
it was like one of the like government official like intake like reporting like websites. And when I send you a link of it, I'll remember the name as well. But basically in the last just like 10 years, the number one immigrating group of folks to California and the larger US has been API folks. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
Asian Pacific Islander folks. And amongst that group, the actual highest ethnic group that's been coming in and like a country of folks coming in are South Asian and particularly Indian folks. So
Mm-hmm.
we've had the highest number of folks immigrating in the last few years to California alone. And like a lot of the folks who have been immigrating are folks who end up either being undocumented or becoming formally undocumented. Like they're either like in the process of getting, their residency, their green card, things like that, or they'll just be undocumented for quite a while, like 5 to 10 years here, or even longer, like in my family's case. And in California alone, we do not have a lot of healthcare access for these folks who are coming and like for these folks who are actually contributing to our society. And like, of course, not to be like, oh, folks who are like contributing to society and like big taxes are the only ones worthy of,
Right.
you know, um, healthcare access, because that's not true. Like, right. And we're not trying to do the whole good immigrant, bad immigrant narrative, but we're all people who are like, worthy of access. We're worthy of
Mm-hmm.
healthcare, regardless of what we're doing or what we're not
Exactly.
doing. Right. And like, and that's for everyone, you, myself, like my partner, your partner, like our families, all that. But the thing that's like really messed up is that a lot of our community members in the Punjabi and South Asian community do not have access to one healthcare, but then even within like the field of therapy, there's not a lot of Punjabi therapists, like folks who speak Punjabi
Mm-hmm.
and folks who speak Hindi, who can actually like, and then there's other languages as well, but even just the two main languages that like folks will be speaking here in California, right? In our communities, like there's not a lot of therapists who speak these languages. And so even that is like a bigger barrier to folks like my parents and
Right.
my community members who are older, right? Like the elders who do not have that like that language access. And so like even in that way, like there's so much that's left out and there's so much that isn't even like being worked on by our government and like by our different institutions and just these places, right, like universities, all these places that are like, oh, we really care about people's mental health, especially BIPOC individuals. And it's like, for me, I don't see that in my community. I don't see them
Mm-hmm.
coming in and like creating these accessible resources for us, like, and creating these toolkits, creating these like pamphlets and things in our language. Like even just a simple fact of like translating something into a language can help someone, even if they don't go to
Right.
that actual place for something. Just them seeing a flyer of it, like, will get them thinking, right, about different things and get them to like maybe want to one day take actionable steps on their mental health. And so that's one big thing. And then the other thing is there's definitely a really big stigma of mental health in my communities of South Asian folks, where the older generation of folks, I feel, and even some of the younger ones in my community, like in my age range too, a lot of the older ones and some of the younger ones like have this, stigma that if you do need to go to like a therapist, you're quote unquote crazy or like
Right.
there's something wrong with you, right? And that we do see in other BIPOC communities, as well as other like community members overall globally. But it's a huge, huge one in my community, especially. Like I remember one time, like I was at the Gurdwara, which is our Sikh temple.
Mm-hmm.
um, I mentioned therapy like out loud, sorry, to one of my siblings, and like one of the like other aunties who was like sitting nearby at a table, she like took a whole head swivel and like was like therapy,
Right.
like, and I could just see it, like I could see it in her face that she was probably, and I don't want to assume, but I could tell at that moment she was probably thinking like, oh, what kind of mental health issues does this family have?
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's being all nosy and like looking at us like, oh, there's something wrong there. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we'll snip it out. And we were just like, okay, like, it's just like a big, big deal that like, you can't even talk about it out loud. You can't even do any kind of like like for Brown Gorge Productions, one of our biggest goals one day is like in the next year or two to host like not just know your rights workshops, for undocumented folks and immigrants in our temples and our communities and our like community centers, but also to host like mental health workshops, right? And like maybe collaborate with folks like you,
Mm-hmm.
and like bring folks in to talk about these things. but we're not even at a place yet where people can even like hear the word and be okay
Mental
with it.
health. Yeah.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Like, so it's like there's a long way to go with it. And of course, the first step is to definitely keep mentioning it and keep mentioning it and like keep encouraging folks to like be okay with it and normalize that word itself. Or you said sorry, that phrase. But it's just like so long to go. And we also have so many other like intersectional issues and like just intersecting issues that go along with mental health that like until we start working on all these other things together, like it's just not gonna be like a big revolutionary time for us to like
Right.
be doing mental health work. You know what I mean?
Right. Hmm. Hmm. The shifts, it prohibits the shift from happening. Yeah. And
Exactly. Yeah.
it makes me think about, like, there's so many other bigger things that are impacting people on a daily basis that it's like nobody
Yeah.
even has the time. Like, who has the
Yeah.
time to sit here and try to dig deep to figure out, okay, let me figure out my narrative of mental health. It's like, well, I haven't had to do anything all this time for it. I got to survive. So
Yeah.
what's the point of trying to figure this out? And that becomes very unfortunate because, that's how people, experience more depression or anxiety or personality disorders, have like, psychotic breaks, things like that, because nobody feels like they have the time to be able to put in that focus on themselves. And then when it is brought up, like you
Yeah.
said, it's that, oh my gosh, mental health, like what is wrong with you? Like, that's not
Yeah.
what,
Yeah.
no.
Because a lot of our elders, right, like they'll think that mental health um is like the least priority, right? Like it's between paying your rent and going to a therapist. Like for them, it's
Exactly.
like the answer is obvious, right? Like I'm gonna pay my rent. Like, I have to pay 1,500 or 2K, whatever the rent is, right? Like they're like, I have to pay my rent. I'm not gonna be out here spending over $100 going to a 45 minute to an hour therapy session. Like
Right.
then they'll be like, what's wrong with you? Let me
Right.
give you a mental health lesson. Like, you know? So it's like that. And then even with now that you mentioned that, I also thought about the fact that like when I have tried to talk to my parents about their mental health, my dad will sometimes be like, okay, but I have a lot of like dental issues. And because I don't have
Yeah.
healthcare for that, I can't even go in for a simple root canal. So you want me to
Hmm.
choose between like going to a therapy session and getting a root canal that I really, really need, like, so for them, even that is like mental health is almost like it's not a real thing because it's not there physically, right? And like for them, like in my parents' generation of folks, like they're thinking of like health in terms of just your physical body and like just your internal organs, your bones, and things like that. And
Right.
like for them, they don't think of like mental health as like a real, like physical thing. And I think that that's also definitely because like this was not even a topic that was talked about. Like even just like a decade ago, like we would only see like like things like therapy in movies like Sex in the City or like just these movies that only primarily would have white characters. And like even in my community, sometimes like when people mention therapy, they're like, oh, that's a white people issue, like,
Hmm.
and it's like that's because primarily white folks have had the like most access to
Access
even
to
have
it.
therapists,
Exactly.
right? So like yeah, it's just like a lot of like cyclical things that like intersect. So it's like in order to counter this one, well, we need to go to this, and then we need to go to, and it's just like a spider web that becomes overwhelmingly huge. And like we can't just do it on our own, right? Like it has to take a whole community. It has to take all of us to like
Hmm.
work towards this. So yeah, yeah. You just made me
Yeah.
think about that right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And like it has me thinking just about like, sometimes even when people don't have access, because even if I think of just like, my ancestors and coming from people who were enslaved and not, of course, definitely during that time, not having no access to no type of nobody that even cared that mental health issues were happening. Like it's still like at certain
Mm,
moments, like the more that I am reminded, the more that I learn, and different things that come up for me just in the history of that, like sometimes the community will come together and find their own ways of healing, rather it was like rather mentally or physically, whether it was going to church or rather it was coming together just to celebrate something, or it was doing hoodoo or voodoo or whatever the case needed to be. People were
yeah.
finding their own way of being able to
Yeah.
cope. Do you feel like people within your community have, even if there's no access, or even if it's like mental health isn't like the priority right now, do you feel like there are things that typically people have done, or even what you do, that you have found to at least give you some sense of like healing or joy, or just a moment to like process and try and be okay with what's happening?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Yeah, I just want to first acknowledge, like, yes, you as a Black person, I feel like have like so much more complexities and like just a harder time in doing stuff like this. I'm really thankful that you're actually one of the only Black therapists that I know of, like that I know
Really?
personally. Yeah, like that I know of. And so like you doing this
Wow.
work is just so, so important. And I'm just in awe of you and I'm so inspired by you, like, because we need more Black folks, especially Black women who are therapists, because like, oh, there's so much healing that needs to be done and so much like community work. And you're really, really out here doing the important work as you're also dealing with like, all your own things that are
Right.
going on and like and just like and like just intergenerational things and like all this other stuff that you have like on the back end. And so yeah, I just want to acknowledge that and just
Thank
take a moment to
you.
be like, wow, like you're amazing. Yeah, and thank you for asking that question because it is so important. Just like what you were saying, similar to that, you definitely made me think of how there are moments where I feel really touched and really, really hopeful for my communities because we do come together in celebratory moments, in celebratory times, also in times of like need when some community members comes to our temple and is like, I'm about to become homeless, like I can't pay my mortgage. Our community members will come and pitch money in, like to make sure
Hmm.
this person can pay their mortgage and like have their home and stay afloat, right? There's been times where I remember like even when I was a kid, like my dad and one of my uncles would come together with some of the other guys like at that time who would do a lot of like seva, which is service in our Sikh community. And like their service work wouldn't just be for the temple, like they would ask our community members who were sometimes like going through a hard time and they'd be like, what do you need? How
Hmm.
can we help you? Right. And like there there would be more of like a self-reliant community thing going on than us like actually calling the authorities, like cops and like asking like the government for help, things like that. Like we've always like as Punjabi Sikh folks, we've always been more of like community oriented and community knitted, like where we'd all be together and we'd all like do our best to support people. And of course that doesn't include, I would say, LGBTQ plus folks and like folks who are different, right? Like in different ways. But in a larger sense, even the folks who don't believe in folks like me who are LGBTQ plus, like they would still come through knowing that I'm someone from their community and I'm like really suffering with things. So that's been a really great moment for me, like growing up to see that like we do come together in the end at the end of the
Yeah,
day, like if there's someone who really, really needs help. And of course that's not with mental health, but I think that does help knowing that there is some hope
absolutely.
in the future for even things like mental health, right? Like of course it's not like the biggest like solution that like it's help that's monetary and help that's like like for need-based things, but it's hopeful for me knowing that like of course if my dad did that and my uncle did that, now with me being that person who's going to be giving or being of service and giving seva in my Sikh community, like now I know that like when I'm asking people what do you need, I can also mention like mental health, right? Like are you doing okay mentally? Like is your
Hmm.
family like survive, like not just surviving physically, but how are you all doing mentally? Like are you in an okay space to even have this
Right.
conversation? And like
Hmm.
and I think that like of course my ancestors, including my dad, my mom, right, like and their families, like they've all laid the foundation for it. And I think now it's like up to me and my siblings and folks my age and even younger kids who are going to become adults to like really now like lay the actual like brickwork and like cement of making this foundation for this like amazing place. And like so that's one of the hopeful things. And the other thing is like I do believe that like everyone in my community has like good hearts. They're very genuinely good people, even though I've been heartbroken at times with some of the transphobia and homophobia that I've had to face
Hmm.
myself. And some of the other issues, like, sometimes I feel like our community sometimes is sexist. And, like even my siblings and I being women doing this work in filmmaking has sometimes been not just frowned upon, but people have straight up been like, oh, you're definitely like you're just doing this as a hobby, like it's not a real thing, like
Right.
but in our eyes we're like, no, we're legit business women, we're
Right.
entrepreneurs,
We out
we're
here.
here like we're here making money, we're here like we're staying busy and booked, all of 2022, like that's the motto, like
Hmm.
I'm not just here playing, like I'm not just picking up a little like iPhone and being like, ooh, let's
Right.
take a video action
Like
cuts,
y'all
no, like
does this for real, for
yeah, like
real.
we do this for real. We worked with big brands. We worked with like amazing music labels. We've worked with
Hmm.
like amazing community members. Like, like we worked with nonprofits to make PSAs for them. Like we've done
Hmm.
everything, all types of different things. And like, of course, we're still entry level filmmakers and storytellers, but nonetheless, we are those things. We are storytellers,
Exactly.
we are
Yes.
filmmakers. Like,
Hmm.
and I think for me, like that's been the biggest thing in my community is like, it sucks to say this, but like they're going to start taking us more seriously when we do start winning the bigger awards, and we
Yeah.
start, they start seeing our work in mainstream media and things like that. But I hope that even now that, like, I hope that they can understand that us doing this work isn't just for us, it's for all the other like queer
Hmm.
children and all the
Hmm.
other queer folks in our community who have never had the opportunity, to speak up and like to actually talk about their issues. And so I hope that like we are inspiring in ways, if not for the elders, at least for the younger folks, And
Yeah.
so that's one of my biggest like takes on this is like it sucks that like there's not a lot of supportive elder folks in our community for the work we're doing now. And we're like literally the pioneers in our community right now. Like there's no one else who's doing this work that we're doing
Yeah.
for
I know
ourselves.
I hadn't
So
heard of it. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So we're the pioneers, and like I know that it's going to be a hard road for us, but like we also like are understanding and affirming of the fact that like it's going to be huge, for all of the folks who come after us because we opened that door now,
hmm.
and all the other queer sick folks who are doing this work too are opening these big doors for everyone to like come in, and like in the next 10 years it'll be very normal in our community, and maybe these community members won't be so hard on us, and won't be so like
Right.
looking down on us for doing the work we do. And yeah, and I think it helps for me, and just like for Brown Girl Drag Productions, like it helps that my siblings are doing it with me because I'm not alone, and so I don't feel like
Yeah.
I'm the only filmmaker here. I think it helps having the other siblings of mine, like the two other ones, like doing this too, because then we're like, no, it's us, it's all together. So like we're not feeling gaslit and we're not feeling like, quote unquote, like going crazy because these people are making us feel that way, So yeah, so there's a lot of hope. It's just gonna take a lot of time.
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So from what you were just saying, for me, one thing that I did want to like kind of like pull from that when it comes to mental health is like the whole idea that it's something that I feel like I'm personally learning too when it comes to being vulnerable and allowing like for my community to grow and for me to like depend on people that are outside of just my family unit, because I'm very much a person that's like I can depend on my family but friends have let me down or all these different things. Is like I'm realizing especially in my marriage and different things and the kind of person that I'm with, is just how important community is, even from like watching him and just him allowing like community to be such a healing place for him and a place where allow people to show up. It's teaching me that community plays a big part in your mental health. And then because the opposite of being with community and being with people is isolation. And then so in hearing you talk about just like your community and how you guys can come together, how all of you can come together and just support one another. Sometimes it can seem very small on the scale of like what mental health can truly mean to take care of like yourself, but I deeply feel that that is a form of taking care of your mental health. It's a form of finding connection. It's a form of not being isolated. It's a form of depending on one another. Like, and people find pure joy and purpose in being able to support each other. So I really do appreciate you kind of like pointing that out. And I wanted to highlight it. And, since you've been in the direction of talking a little bit about your projects, business, becoming these mogul people, like I would
Yeah.
love to hear more about like the story behind it that we kind of touched on a little bit before, and just the kind of work that you do, like share with people, because I feel like it's so important. And it really struck me to hear you say like, wow, I'm the only Black therapist that and then like you're the only person that I know that's doing the work that you're
Yeah.
doing. It's like a part of it is heartbreaking, like dang, but then a part of it is so like monumental and so like inspiring and so just an awe type of moment as well. So I definitely want to make sure that people are just aware of what it is that y'all have done, as well as what's to come, because it sounds really, really amazing. And it's so powerful, you can see it. And I love when I hear people saying like, we know what we about to do. We know this is about to be big. Like you can see where it is that y'all are going. So definitely share more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thank you so much. You're like praising us over here. I'm like, stop, I'm shy. No, I appreciate that. Thank you for recognizing that, Shatina. Yeah, so what's to come? Oh, sorry, not what's to come. Let me talk about real quick. So we started off as three sisters who were just always really interested in filmmaking. Because like we were always fascinated by storytelling because our mom would always tell us stories growing up of like, India and like what it was like to have been there. And because we were never able to like go back home, we had to always imagine and like visualize what our home country looked like, what our home over there would look like, what our friends over
Mhm.
there could have been, and like, and what our relatives were looking like when they were growing up. Because when we were growing up, even though the internet became a big thing in my home, we couldn't afford internet. And so we didn't have internet until I was like a junior in high school or like a sophomore in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So we never like did the whole like, web camera chat thing with people until like I was literally like a senior in high school. And so by that point, I'm like 17 and like my cousins have all grown up, and like anybody that I could have known at my own age, like I couldn't even recognize them because all I would see is like pictures from them. So we'd always have to like, have visuals in our heads. And so we naturally just became really, and I don't want to like brag, but like we became really good
I mean,
storytellers. No, no, no. And like, and I mean that in the most like genuine way of like, we kind of like learned just from our mother of like how to build stories, like, from start to end and like what
mm-hmm.
fascinating like perspectives to take from each one and like what angles to take.
Yeah, it's a skill.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so like we learned how to do all that from our mom. And because we learned it from her, someone who's not educated here at all, like doesn't know any English and like doesn't even write in English, things like that, it was even more impactful for us because like we learned how to do it in our own language. And then that made us like become very intentional about the stories that we're telling because it was always from a place of love and it was always from a place of like heartbreak, from like being undocumented. And so like when we started filmmaking, it was naturally always the stories that we wanted to like tell the world about ourselves, and like for example, one of the first films we did in 2019, it's called Borrowed Dreams. That's an English translation, and then in Hindi, it's called Udare Sapne.
Mm-hmm.
So in that moment, Rango Joy Productions became like a thing. Like
A
we formed our
thing.
company, and we were like, okay, we're Rango Joy Productions, and our first movie is going to be a very depressing film about deportations
Mm-hmm.
because that's what we were feeling at that moment. And so from that one film, like the title of that film like really really resonated with us at that moment, and it was really such a depressing film that it really did a number on our mental health. Like here we're talking about mental health. At that moment we were like, oh my gosh, like
Mm-hmm.
we're doing really bad because this film was just really really dark and like but it was really representative of like the moments that we were going through at that moment, at that time. And like the title itself, Borrowed Dreams, was something that resonated with me heavily as the writer and director of that project because at that moment, like as someone who had just graduated from school, I went to CSUN, Cal State Northridge, had a BA, but like literally had no job prospects, literally had nothing lined up, like in terms of fellowships. Like my DACA was expiring at that time too,
Mm-hmm.
like my papers to be able to work here and stuff. Literally had no money in my bank account. And it felt like I was living on borrowed time. It felt like I was
Yeah.
living on something that was about to run out. And like it had honestly run out, but I was just like finessing my way through like, barely paying my bills. Like I would barely pay like the minimum on my credit card, on my car payment, whatever, and like would barely survive months a month, like by doing little like honestly crappy babysitting gigs and like all this stuff. So when we made that film in the summer of 2019, it was like we were on borrowed dreams, we were on borrowed
Mm-hmm.
time. And the dreams aspect of it was the fact that like, people had kept calling us dreamers growing up. And like that's a whole nother topic of like why it's kind of problematic to call undocumented folks dreamers, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like but but we felt like the dreams that we had personally for ourselves of like building something here in this country, the dreams to like make our parents proud, the dreams to like, honor whatever our ancestors did for us to be here in this like country. And like literally our parents crossed 7 seas, crossed so many different countries, and like did so much for us to be here that like at that moment we felt really let down by ourselves and we felt like maybe we were failures. And so it felt like naming the movie Borrowed Dreams was the best thing.
Mm-hmm.
And from that moment, that was our first film in 2019, really depressing, really just crappy. And we had no budget for it. We had no support, like institutional support. We had no fellowships or grants or anything to make it. It was just like
Just
on
went
our
for
own.
it.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we had some of our friends just donating like $5 to $10. And we managed to get like $500 just to like hire someone to be the camera person, like the DP.
Mm-hmm.
And he was nice enough, shout out to Chris Jackson. If he ever listens to this, he was so nice enough to like join our team and like, work for literally like basically nothing and like build our film with us, right? And from that moment though, like we realized like, okay, we want to be working with community members, but we don't want to be like further traumatizing them and further like not
Right.
paying them properly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because then
Mm-hmm.
that just
Mm-hmm.
like that defeats the purpose of who we are. And so like from that moment, we were like, okay, we're not going to make another film until we can raise enough money to
Okay.
hire people properly. So from 2019, of course, the pandemic happened in 2020, and even through 2021, like there was a lot going on. So fast forward to like fall 2021, like 2 years later, we are like in the midst of pre-production for the second film that I wrote. I wrote it and I actually just directed it, but it's called Zindagi Dobara, Life Again. And this film actually has a lot more hope. This film is a film that we're currently working on. We just filmed it in March, and it's in like post-production right now. And so that's the yeah. There's a lot of
Okay.
exciting stuff going on. But real quick, like before I end that, we like sat together in like September 2021, and we were like, okay, we realistically like we had a talk with our producers that we hired, and they were like, yeah, y'all need to raise up over $10,000 if you're really trying to like hire people properly and pay them
Right.
properly. And so my sisters and I, being like not as experienced filmmakers, made a whole like fundraiser on this website called Seed and Spark. And I think I shared it with you too at that moment, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, yeah, in October for 4 weeks, like the fundraiser ran for like 30 days, I believe. In those 4 weeks, dude, we raised up over like $12,000
Which is amazing.
on our own.
Because I
Yeah,
remember you doing it and me spreading it,
yeah,
and I was like, okay, I'm gonna donate. I was like,
yeah,
Rob, we gotta give something. And so to hear you say
yeah.
post-production, I'm like, oh, because I'm not on Instagram no more. So I can't really
Oh,
see like
okay.
what's happening. So that's amazing to
Yeah.
still hear about the progress of it.
Oh, yeah. Dude, we like thank you for donating too and for contributing and supporting, because that money that we were able to make in October um helped us shoot the film in March. Like we had to wait because of
Okay.
like, Omicron variant and
Right.
stuff. Like it was supposed to be shot in like December, then January, and then we just moved it to March because it was like we wanted to make sure like everybody was safe with COVID, and like especially our actors who had to have their masks off, right? Like
Right.
while they're stuff. So we ended up making the film, and like it's changed my entire life honestly already, because first off we made it with other fellow impacted folks who were undocumented, LGBTQ plus, and an entire BIPOC crew. Like that's something that you don't see in Hollywood at all, and that we're doing on our little level of like, only having like a 10K budget and doing, when Hollywood films have like millions of dollars and they
Right.
still aren't able to do, right? So like,
Or do they want to?
oh, do
But
they
that's a whole
want to?
nother.
Yeah,
That's
a
a
whole
whole
nother
nother
episode.
thing.
We could do episode 12 on that. I'm just kidding. But like,
Right.
like it's a whole nother topic of like whatever. So from even just that perspective of like production and being a company, we were like really intentional with who we wanted on it, what kind of community we wanted to build. And it wasn't just a film though, because the story itself is inspired by my grandmother's passing. Like she passed like
Oh, okay.
in 2018 from ovarian cancer, and the story ended up being about a grandmother and like granddaughter who come together because like the granddaughter's like parents die, and she has to come live with her estranged aunt, and sorry, her estranged grandmother. And in the end, we ended up like in the last few weeks, we ended up shifting it to, instead of grandmother, like aunt, because our actor and myself were like, oh, you're too young to be a grandmother and whatever. But like, but it was essentially about a grandmother and granddaughter coming together and like figuring out how to live together and like figuring out what to do. And there is an LGBTQ plus aspect to it. So like there's, I don't want to like give anything away, but like,
right.
It's like
people gotta watch
together
it
with all this. Yeah, you have to watch it for that, right? And it's coming out in fall 2022, so it'll be out soon in a few months. But like it's like they came together to like figure out what to do, and like the whole film is about second chances, a life again. Like even though her parents died, the teen is, hoping to build something and like hoping to have some reconciliation and like some healing. And it has a lot to do with mental health actually. And so it's all about these things. But for me, the big takeaway when I was writing the script was like, I couldn't afford therapy. I couldn't afford anything else. So all I could afford was writing the stuff on my laptop, right? And so I
right
started
that
writing
was
the story.
therapeutic
Exactly. It was a therapeutic form for me. And like when I wrote the story out, I wrote it with the intentions of thinking like, if my grandmother was still alive and I was able to tell her like, hey, I'm a queer person and I'm doing this work, what would happen? Like I don't even know like if she would be receptive to it or not. But I made this story with the intentions of the grandmother or the older relative being someone in a whole different universe where it is acceptable to
right
like have some sort of LGBTQ plus
right
identity and some lifestyle, sorry, not lifestyle, but like a life that is different, from other folks. And like, and just hoping that like it works out for them at least. So in my story, it like is maybe gonna work out for the characters, maybe not, but it's like a hopeful thing
right
that I couldn't have in my own life. And so
right
that's kind of like what our stories are with Brown Girl Joy Production is we are reimagine and we reinvent our own like, communities, like issues, different immigration diasporas, different sorts of like moments where hope is needed
Right.
in the form of short films as well as like other multimedia projects.
Yeah.
And so Zindagi Dobara, Life Again, that film that we're working on is the current project that's going to be out summer. And like, you'll be invited to the premiere, and Rod, like all
Yeah.
the folks who supported us will be there. And after that, our whole goal for 2022 is like, we want to officially incorporate our business. And we want to have some sort of nonprofit aspect to it as well, where
Mm-hmm.
we want to actually start a fellowship over summer for youth between the ages of like 15 to 25 who want to come in, who are BIPOC and want to come in and like shoot a film over summer and like get training
Mm-hmm.
on how to like be storytellers themselves. And so like that's something that we're hoping that we can start up for next summer in 2023 and like have funding for it. And so like that's the biggest thing for 2022 is like getting the funding to make the projects that we want to make, getting the funding to make the fellowship initiative that we have, and then also imagining like for the first time in our lives, like we are able to imagine as an undocumented person and as a queer person, I feel just so much joy. And like the idea of our name was always to provide joy, but we were never
Mm-hmm.
feeling it in our work. But after this project, we're now like reimagining like what does joy look like as brown girls too? Like
Mm-hmm.
what does our name have to do with the work we're doing, and like how do we connect all these things, and how do we bring joy into other people's lives, even
Right.
though we're all going through so much shit, like, so yeah, so that's something that we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's beautiful. And it's like you're literally with the work that you're doing, you create a lens of
yeah,
a better or different alternative of what it looked like to live in a way where the stigma is already broken or where the stigma will
yeah,
be broken while also living out that narrative, which is a really
exactly.
beautiful thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're going through the same things that we're doing in our stories. And I think in a way it is very therapeutic. And like when we're talking about mental health, it helps because like I said, for the first time we have hope. And that hope comes from our stories finally being able to like have a life of their own, right? When they're filmed and when people are able to see them. And like for us, it's not even about becoming famous or like being these big filmmakers in Hollywood. For us, it's about if even like two queer kids in our community could see our film and like
Mm-hmm.
shed a few tears and be like, yo, I'm gonna be okay in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to kill myself. Honestly, like
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm-hmm.
a really deep thing to say, but I
It's
grew up wanting to
real.
kill myself. Like, like I had suicidal thoughts all the time because I was like the only queer person in my community, right? Like if we could even just get two people to not want to like kill themselves or like have these thoughts and feel some sort of hope, my job is done. And
Yeah.
I'll be happy, like I'll be really fulfilled. And so that's like our big thing. And I think that is why we're like being sought out now, and we're actually becoming successful because we had these very big intentions in our hearts. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that you can see them too. And I think that that really helps with our work is like when people are able to see our intentions and the actionable steps that we're taking for those intentions, they want to jump on and they're like, well, how can we help? How can we contribute? Like, where do we like, show you support? And it's been overwhelming in the last few months because we've been getting a lot of that kind of support now. And like,
Mm-hmm.
it's finally feeling really, really good because I'm like, yay, like people are seeing, like, we're here to stay. We're here to make this amazing work for our communities and like serve our communities and like help ourselves. And so it feels really amazing and I'm really, really blessed. And even you having me on this podcast now to talk about this makes me feel so amazing because it's just
Yes.
it's amazing, to be able to do this. So yeah, I'm thankful every day. Yeah.
Yes, of course. And thank you so much for sharing just like, your story and sharing your family story and sharing just like how these real life experiences have shaped passion for you and work for you that probably doesn't even feel like work because it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
it's just passion and you living your life in this way. Y'all definitely deserve all the flowers, all the
Oh, thank
acknowledgement, because I
you.
know that like, sometimes when we hear stuff, it can sound like it's easier when you see the finished product or it seems, but I know that it takes a lot of work, a lot of sacrifice, a lot of energy,
Oh
a lot of
yeah.
planning, a lot of stress, like just a lot of everything and joy in order to be able to make these projects come to life. So I'm definitely just honored that you were willing to do the podcast, and I'm so inspired. Like the more that I listen to you, and like I said, like the artistic part of me like gets just so inspired when I hear people going for it and when I hear people like doing doing. And definitely you and your partner, like, every time I think of y'all, I'm just like, wow, like they're just doing it. Like they're just going through it. They're not giving up on their passions and their art and, you know, what it is that they really want to do to transform this world. And it makes me like, just kind of be like, okay, Chetina, you got to figure out how to be able to intertwine and put things like, you know, and it's like, I think when it comes to, like, I know, like you said, like even in your community, like, oh, this isn't a real job. I feel like in a lot of communities, it's like art can be seen as not a real job until it really pops, or like your name is out there, you're really making money, you're really doing this. And it's that fear of sustainability. And like I said, that whole idea of survival and generations being like, you know, you have to be able to survive. You have to have the basic necessities. And I definitely know for me, that's what made me kind of step back a little bit from like my art side of things. Is like, okay, you gotta make money. Like, how will I get paid if I do this? How will I be able to? So it's still trying to figure out and maneuver like through what that process looks like. But when I see people making it happen, it makes me realize like, okay, you can make this happen too, because you have things to put out there that can, like you said, help people be like, okay, I don't want to kill myself today, or I feel very motivated today, or actually this helped uplift me out of depression, or like really just having that same type of goal to want to inspire people in that way. So thank you so very much for adding some light and just some spark and fire in me, where I'm like, oh yeah, like now I feel like doing this, or let me think a little bit more about this just from the conversation that we've had today. And you're just such an amazing, beautiful, well-rounded person that just has so much to just offer the world, offer the community, offer just everyone. Like I can tell when someone has a really great radiating spirit, and you definitely have that since the very moment that I met you. So I do really appreciate it. Of course, I do really appreciate
you. I'm so humbled. I'm so honored. Thank you so much. And yeah, and like, you know, shout out to our partners for, you know, like being so supportive to us. If Rod's not supportive, you let me know. I'll be the most.
Shoot, it's on Avi. Shoot, it's on deck. It's on site.
Yes. No, I'm glad that like, you know, we're both like, you know, wanting to do work like this. And I hear you on like even the sustainability thing. Like, sorry, real quick. I know we're like over time right now. Sustainability is the biggest concern, even for us right now. Like we haven't like made it in the sense of like we're making a bunch of money, but and even when we are booked and busy, it's like, you know, the trade-off is always like investing in ourselves, right? Versus like working a 9 to 5 where you know you'll get paid. And like it's just it's kind of like having to take that leap of faith, which is really scary at times. And it's scary to me even every day now, where I'm like, oh gosh, I hope, like, you know, I pray and I'm like, I hope I can pay my bills. Like I hope one day that this is my main gig and not me
it's
like
coming.
Yeah, exactly. And even for you, you know, I know that, you know, you're, you know, with Always Live Lovely, like I know that there's something big coming for you in terms of like intersecting your artwork and your like beautiful storytelling work with, you know, your therapy. And like even just you, like I said, being a Black therapist and doing even just this like podcast, this is actually art in itself, you know, like you're out here not just like wanting to, you know, do the traditional therapy route. You're literally like opening up with folks like me and the other wonderful people who come on your podcast and like creating something with them. And that is like so beautiful to see. Like your collaboration, girl, it's gonna take you far. Like you have great collaboration skills. And I know that it's gonna be big. And I would love to collaborate with you in the future as well. Like, we'd be so happy to have you on. And speaking of Avi, we're actually like about to go into production for his film too. Like,
Okay.
Producer.
Yes.
And it's actually it's like a very like, you know, Black community oriented story. So like I'm just like taking a backseat and letting him like do all his stuff because you know, of course I'm not Black. And so like, you know, it's like it's a lot of like him shifting the narrative and like trying to figure out what he wants to do, but it's all about mental health as well. And so like I think there's ways that we can even collab on that.
Yeah.
And like, you know, you and Rod can literally jump on in some ways. So
that's really cool. That makes me excited. And even just like, you know, I know you said you had a film that y'all did before and you have a film that's coming up. Like, where can we actually like watch, or like what's a website, or how can people continue to support?
Absolutely.
Give us that information.
Yeah, our Instagram handle is very easy. It's just at Brown Girl Joy. Like, so, and I'll write it for you and I'll send it to you so that you can share it. Like, I'll send you the links and maybe you could post them in the.
Yeah, definitely email it to me. Because I would love to do that.
Yeah, right now we have our Instagram. Our website is actually going to go live like by the end of this week too.
Oh, great. Perfect timing.
Yeah, by the time you post it, I'm sure that it'll be live. And, like, folks can view some of our stuff there. For right now, because a lot of our projects are actually at film festivals and stuff, it's kind of exciting. They're not
Oh,
viewable like publicly yet, but we
okay.
have a lot of stills and like very beautiful like
Okay.
narratives written and things that people could check out. That'll give them a great sense of like where things are. And by the summertime, one of the films will be publicly viewable on our website too. And I'll give you a
Okay.
nudge then to let folks know.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
so
of
much for
course.
sharing that. I definitely want, the audience, because I have like a small but mighty but growing audience.
Oh,
Same thing
I
as
got
you.
it growing. It's growing.
Same thing
Yes,
as you.
it's
I'm like, if I can
flourishing.
reach one person, hey, then the job here is done. So,
Yeah, no, for
so
sure.
really want
I
people to be
hear
able to
you.
have access to it. And I didn't know if you had just any like closing thoughts or any closing questions or anything that you just wanted to make sure that people really got, from this podcast conversation.
Yeah, yeah, I would love it if both of us could share just like something that's been bringing us joy recently, like
Mm-hmm.
both of us. So you could
Mm-hmm.
start, and then I could end, and then you could close. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Hmm.
You like, let me think.
So, I'll say, because I think it is like a perfect little timing for me to make this little announcement because of the simple fact that like I
Oh
put
yeah.
out one episode and then I kind of like didn't
Oh
put out
yeah,
any more
yeah.
episodes for this season. I'm like, oh my goodness, great, and
Oh,
drop the ball. But I'm
you're
trying to budget
so
out. But
funny.
I
Yeah.
definitely feel like the most two biggest things that have been giving me the most joy is one being a newlywed and getting married in January. So like,
Yeah.
that has really been like great and just transformative in all the most beautiful ways. And then also in addition to that role, like I'm becoming a mom. So becoming a mom in June. So that has also been the next biggest thing.
Wow.
And it's such a like, as I'm sitting here and as you've been talking and as I've been just thinking about like, okay, career lives for me, because with women and having the baby and the shifts and having to take the break and then having to figure out how to pick up from there, it
Yeah.
really like I'm teaching myself to look at it as not like, okay, I got to put this on pause or I got to do this or I got to do that, but it's like new beginnings. Like it's like an
Yeah.
opportunity for a new beginning for me to pick up and do something that not only like I used to like really be like, okay, my family's looking at me and that makes me really proud and I'm breaking things generationally. And I really took pride because I'm an aunt and I've been an aunt since I was 5. So I have a couple of nieces and
Wow.
nephews. And every time I would graduate, I would really make it a point of like, I'm doing this so that you can see what you can do. And I'm doing this so that you can go further than me. So you can see, well, somebody did this, so let me try to go further. But it's like, it is now on a whole nother level of like, my child will be watching me and I
Yeah.
have a husband that's like rooting for me, and it makes me
Yeah.
really like think like, okay, what is it that I want him to see his mommy do? And I want him to be able to see me like overcome fear and overcome standing in my own way and really go for what I wanted with my career and what I wanted with my life, so that he can know
Mm.
like the fears that was starting to like make me like, okay, I'm not going to do this. Let me just stay in this box. Let me just stay with the 9 to 5. Let me just do what society says is how I'm going to survive. Like being able to break that for just my family lineage and even for my husband's family lineage of like, okay, but your mom and dad, we go after what we want. So when he gets to the point
Wow.
of figuring out, it's a boy, but when he gets to the point of figuring
Yeah.
out like, what he wants to do in life, us being able to just support him and him being able to know like, don't let fear be the thing that stops you. If you have something you're really passionate about and that you want to go for it, we're going to support you and try to make that happen. We're going to help uplift you. And so like it's such a deeper level of me thinking now of like things that I can create now, more so from building on top of things I already know. Like he's going to be a part of witnessing that. And so that's been like a really big just joy for me of trying to like let all this let all this sink in of
Yeah.
what is to come.
Oh, that is so sweet. Congrats on everything. And
Thank
like,
you.
oh, I can't even imagine. You probably waving that finger around too, like new life over here. That's
Listen, my because of being pregnant, my finger swell. I can't even I can't even
no.
put it
Oh
on right
gosh,
now.
the
And
mess.
I thought I was
The
doing so
mess.
good. I'm like, oh, you only got like 2 more months. And then one day I woke up and
Oh,
I'm like, it won't go down. Like so I'm
dude.
just like,
You
well,
Yeah, and I already know you're gonna do this in the future, but you need to do some podcast of like your experiences being pregnant as
oh,
well as like
absolutely.
marriage, like because this is
It's
this
on my mind.
good, good. Yeah, see that's what I mean. You're a visionary, like you're already thinking
That's
about
that
things.
season
No,
3, y'all. That's that
yeah.
season 3.
So
I'm
season
already on
three,
it.
hey, good, good. See, at least now they know there is a season three, and like
Uh-huh.
yeah,
There definitely will be.
that's amazing. I'm so happy for you, and again, congrats, congrats, congrats. It's So wonderful. And that is such joyous news, like both of those things. And you being so like, intentional with your life and like building something for your child is just the most beautiful thing. And I think like your child is in good hands.
Thank
Like they're
you.
gonna have such an amazing mom and such an amazing dad. And so just really proud of you both, like y'all
Thank
are
you so
killing
much.
it. So that's great. Yeah. And just real quick before we end again, my joyous thing,
Yes.
well, one, it was hearing you say your joyous thing, not to even be cheesy, just really, really happy to hear you say all that. And then two, just my joyous thing is just being really grateful these days to have the life I'm having and the opportunities I'm about to
Yeah.
have and like having currently, with Brown Girl Joy Productions and like finally like honing and like owning myself being a filmmaker and like my identity is a woman of color, a queer person, undocumented person, being in this space of filmmaking that is often very white, often very, very focused on, uh, like white folks and mainstream media just does not even talk about LGBTQ plus issues and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. And I'm just very happy that like I go beyond just like representation. Like I go to like actually build these communities and build these amazing spaces where people feel more than just tokens, right? Like for
Mm-hmm.
these big I guess like name phrases of like DEI work and like representation and like POC, like I do more than that, and that makes me happy now to recognize that like it's being seen, it's being recognized, and that I'm just constantly thinking about this stuff. It makes me happy, and it makes me happy that my family's doing it with me. It's the most important thing
Yes.
to me. So yeah, I'm just happy, all around.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. That's so beautiful. And you just embodying and just being
yeah.
present in where you are with your life right now and just finding the joy and the love and the expansion that you're experiencing it throughout all. So I
Yeah.
definitely appreciate you for that. Was like a perfect way to close out the episode on
Yeah.
such a brown girl joy. What is your joy? Like I see what you did. I see what you did
Yeah.
there. I do.
Yeah.
And I
Thank you. Thank
appreciate it.
you.
So
Yeah.
definitely y'all check out Brown Girl Joy. Check out Amrit Kaur. Actually, remember the name. Like, remember it because
Oh,
y'all
thank
heard it
you.
here. Y'all heard it
Yeah.
here. So
Oh,
make sure I'm going to make sure that I put all of the information in the bio for the episode that's going to be on YouTube and it's going to be on all the podcast platforms. But thank you so much for taking out the time today to be able to just speak with us and share and have this breaking barriers discussion on undocumented lens. And I'm just looking forward to us collaborating more in the future.
yeah, absolutely. Sounds great. Thank you.